This is feedback on the 2015 exam Water on the Land. First question is a map skills question, and you're asked to measure the length of the dam along the XY line. So you'll need to get your map and locate the XY line. Take a spare piece of paper and mark off the start and end of the XY line. Then pick that paper up and put it on the scale at the bottom of the map. You can see that it's 0.1, 0.2 and a 0.25 kilometres. So the acceptable answers for this were anything from 0.25 to 0.3 kilometres. What shape is the Damflass Reservoir is a tricky question. Have a look at it. Basically, any answer that showed that the top of the reservoir was narrow and the bottom was wide. Some people wrote it looks like a stretched out sock. Some people wrote it looks like a hoover. Some people wrote it looks like a hair cell. All of those would be acceptable answers. Question 2A part 3 was very hard because we couldn't really see the contour lines on the map that you had in the exam. However, this is what the examiner was looking for. Relief consists of two things, height and slope. So you would have needed to quote the heights in metres reading from the contour lines, or you could have said that it was higher to the north, the land was higher to the north than the south. In terms of slope, we're looking at steepness, saying that it was steep in the north and a more gentle or flatter slope in the east. Okay, moving on to the next question. This question was another skills-based question where they wanted you to respond to a map. As always, in these questions, to get full marks, you must actually refer to the information that is shown on the map. So, if we have a look at the two maps we've got one about rainfall, and we can see that this colour is where rainfall is low, which is predominantly on the east coast, and that this colour is where rainfall is high, which is predominantly on the west coast, particularly in areas like the Lake District, Snowdon, Cornwall, South Wales. Conversely, when we look at the population density, we can see that this colour shows a low population density, which is mostly on the west, particularly in Cornwall, Wales and Cumbria, while the high population density is on the east coast, notably the highest being in London, but also all the way around through the southeast. So the question specifically asks about water surplus and water deficit. If you just talked about what you could see on these maps, then you're not really talking about water surplus or water deficit, just talking about high rainfall and low population density. You need to relate the two together and relate it to water surplus or water deficit to get full marks. So, this was the sort of information that we were looking for. For a water surplus, you had high rainfall and low population densities. And because they were asking you for that there are likely to be areas of water surplus and deficit, you need to actually talk about specific parts of the country. So the west of England, especially the Lake District, Wales, and you might add in Cornwall. And that the water deficit was the opposite, low rainfall, high population density, and then you need to say where this would be found. East England, especially London and East Anglia. This was a level mark question. Level 1, the marks went from 1 to 4, and for level 2, the marks went from 5 to 6. So, to get level 2, you needed to explicitly talk about areas of surplus and areas of deficit. An obvious structure for this question would be 2 paragraphs. Okay, moving on to the next question. In this question, you were asked to label features of the waterfall. Some of these could be really simple ones, like the way that the river is bending before it gets to the waterfall. That actually there are 2 steps to this waterfall, that it goes down in 2 parts. White water, not fast flowing water, because we can't see that, although we know it is, we can see that it's white water. You can point out here the undercutting, and lots of people wrote the idea that this was the steep-sided gorge, where previously the waterfall was here and it has retreated backwards, leaving a steep-sided gorge. A tricky one was that to indicate the hard rock, to get a mark for that, you also had to indicate the soft rock, and this is because you can only say that that's hard rock. You can only say that it's harder rock because you can see that this rock has been eroded more rapidly, leaving undercutting. So that was a tricky mark to get there. Okay, moving on to the next question. Okay, this is a lovely question, and there'll always be an explain the formation of a feature on your rivers exam, and you can find all of the past papers, mark schemes for those on Elaine. So this time they asked you to explain the formation of a waterfall. Always they're looking for 4 steps in the right order and linked together without any steps being omitted. If you can do that, you will be getting a level 2, which is 3 to 4 marks. If your explanation of the formation jumps around or has gaps in it, then that would be a level 1 of 1 to 2 marks. So we have to start off with the band of hard rock overlying the band of soft rock, and the idea that the soft rock is eroded more quickly is key here. We have to include the idea that the hard rock is undercut. It's good to include the types of erosion next, abrasion and hydraulic action, and to show how they create the plunge pool. So if we've got a plunge pool, our next point then is about the overhang, and that it eventually collapses, and that the rocks from the overhang then further deepen the plunge pool by abrasion. It's really good if you use a diagram to answer this question, but you must make sure that your labels are as detailed as these points here, and that they are numbered in the correct order. Okay, moving on to the next question. Okay, this question was quite tricky, and it's always disappointing when the 8-mark question isn't a case study, but that's just the way it goes with some of the exams. So the question was about describing how two river processes, transportation and deposition, so make sure you're not talking about erosion, and how they change as the river goes downstream. So always for an 8-mark question you want to come up with a structure, and you should be using paragraphs. So if we're talking about downstream changes, to me an obvious structure would be to talk about the upper course in the first paragraph, then the middle course, and then the lower course. But if you preferred, you could have talked about transportation in one paragraph and deposition in the other. So if we have a look at what might be included in this, in the upper course, what's being transported is huge boulders. A lot of students wrote that in the upper course, because the river doesn't have a lot of energy, it can only move really small particles. And there is a logic behind that, but in nature the boulders that fall into the stream in the upper course are huge boulders from the rocky sides of the V-shaped valley. So there are huge boulders which are moved in the upper course, and they're moved by traction, being rolled along the bed. You could add in that this happens during floods. Therefore, because the huge boulders for most of the time are just lying on the bed of the river or in the V-shaped valley, at that point they've been deposited because you've got the lower flow. Okay, moving on to the middle course. In the middle course, the sediment has become a lot smaller, and that's because it's been eroded by attrition. Therefore, it's transported by saltation and suspension, particularly because the river now has more energy. In the middle course, deposition happens on the inside bend of a meander. Moving on to the lower course, you know that the lower course of the river often looks really dirty, and that's because it has a very large amount of suspended load, which is mostly clay. It's been eroded by attrition throughout the course of the river and has become very small particles that are now moved by suspension. These are deposited anywhere where the river's velocity slows. This could be a delta, it could be at the bend, at the meander, it could be in a creek or an extra bit of the river, but it's deposited at any point where the river's velocity slows.